This is Brent, aka I Tried to Warn You. I'm going to be making a video today reviewing the hand history from 2+2 Heads Up Sit and Go forum member HungryGuy. If you remember a while back when we did the 2012 Heads Up Sit and Go Championship, he had made a thread basically asking to be staked, and to try to incentivize him to play. I offered to make him a hand history review. So that's what we're doing today. A nice gesture by I Heard Joe Blows, who basically bought half of his action to try to help him to play the tournament as well. So here we fold to a min raise with 8-3, obviously fine. The quick hands I'm going to try to skip through as fast as possible. Min raise here, ace-5 suited, obviously fine. Should be c-betting about half pot here. We do, which looks good. And get a fold. Looks like we flat a min raise here with king-4 off. By the way, I meant to mention at the beginning of the video that he's a low stakes player. I think he plays like the 350s. So that should be noted kind of while we're going through this hand history here, is you might get a better idea of, kind of the things that he's learning and catching on to at those stakes. So standard fold here. You could elect to play back besides the ace high flop. If it was like a queen high flop or something, it'd be better to play back at. Of course, the texture changes a little bit that way as well, but just not very good to be playing back at ace high flops against an opponent who we assume is probably competent, being that they're a forum member. And fold 10-2 here. You can definitely min raise here, especially this deep is fine. You can fold there, I guess, as well, but I definitely would be min raising more buttons. And looks like we make a 3-bet here. I don't really like the sizing. You're pretty much never ever going to get a fold, being that they only have to call 60 more to win 180. They're already getting 3-1, and they're in position. Not that it's bad to mix up your play by 3-betting here. That's fine. I would just make it a little bit bigger, probably anywhere from like 150 to 170, as you're never going to get a fold here, assuming that we probably want to try to pick up the pot as often as possible as well. So just something that I would note there. Pretty favorable flop here with a flush draw. Might make it a little bit bigger. The good part about sizing like this is that you can almost rep a stronger hand by betting a little bit smaller, especially with not a whole lot of history against the opponent. This is like our 5th hand in. Chances are that he may even, not that he's going to fold out like a ton of his range based on a difference of 30 chips, but he may just get the impression that you have a bigger hand based on you betting 90 instead of 120. Or at least, I've kind of seen that in the past. So just something to think about, but I'd just be barreling standard half pot bet size here is fine. And we pick up good. And limp here, I'm not really a big fan of this, especially again at these stacks. This structure is much, much different than we had for the black chip or the USA tournament. So I would definitely still be min raising here. No reason to really be limping yet. And definitely would be barreling here. Can't really assume that he's going to have a ton of this board, but it's still fine to just throw out a min bet, as we should be doing that with value hands, and also complete air here as well. And turn he leads, so we'd expect him after we check back the flop to be leading a ton of turns anyway. It sucks when he does show up with 9x because we just basically gave him a free card there, but at this point our hand is too strong to fold as well. And come out with the river. So looks like he checks here. I don't see a whole lot of reasons to bet. He's going to show up with a lot of missed draws and things like that. I mean, if you had some crazy, insane history, you could probably elect to, throw out a value bet here. But at this point, we don't know much about him or what he's doing, considering we don't have any history with him besides these few hands here. So I think checking back here is just perfectly fine. So he flopped a pair, turned a flush draw, pretty standard. With showdown value, I'm fine with if we're villain, just checking back on the river here. If we did just have like a missed flush draw without a pair, if we're villain, I think leading this river is actually pretty good. Like he's gonna, after he checks back the flop, we can't really put him on a pair a lot of times, which, I consider to be a mistake by not barreling the flop if we're him. But I mean, he's gonna have a ton of missed draws. 10 jack. 7-10 did get there, but of course we're only going to get raised there in most cases. especially since we pretty much know that he never has a flush here since he didn't lead the flop. So if we are villain, I think it's an interesting spot, even though it's just a small pot at this point, to be leading the river because we can definitely rep a flush where he really can't. So interesting spot kind of from his point, and again just standard check back, if we're hero. All right, so face a min raise here. Flatting is good, and miss a flop, and fold out to the half pots. C bet here. Min raise looks fine. By the way, I'm pretty sure that said hide, which I hope we are hiding our hands. Let's reverse that real quick here. Flip back one hand. Okay, 10-5. Yeah, you can fold that there. All right, so back to, folding again here. Again, standard thing, as I mentioned earlier, pretty easy to min raise there, I think. Garbage hand, but in position, we want to be more active from the button. We pick up a fold there. Yeah, it does say hide. So min raise here, get a call. Decent flop with a double gut shot. And check back. Again, this is great spot to be barreling. I'd say a standard half pot C bet here is fine. 60 at 120. I am literally never checking back this flop here. And now we face a lead, so obviously we can't ever fold. But we're opening ourselves up to be barreled on. And in this point, we can't really rep a whole lot. So when we call here, we're going to already look really, really weak, and we fold. So not a big fan here. Even if he does have a flush draw, we still have 6 outs there, and there's really no reason to be folding here. So hate the fold. You could elect to maybe put a read on him at this point, or try to draw an assumption that 75 at 120 he might have a hand that he's trying to protect, but regardless we can never fold here. So I'm always calling here, and you should never be folding. So moving on, blinds jump up, easy fold here. Probably start 3-betting a little bit more. Villain's been pretty active, it seems, from the button. I think we got a walk or two earlier. Easy flat here. Decent flop to be check raising. If I'm villain, I'd be standard C betting about 80 or 90. I think 100 is just a little bit too much, even though we are still extremely deep. I just think overall, if you're playing in a normal structure, that 80 or 90 is fine. Leaning more towards 80. Again, just a preference thing. And fold out there. You could definitely be check raise bluffing that flop. That wasn't a bad flop at all to do so. Just kind of depends how you interpret his bet sizing there, and what you think that means. Again, we're folding out. Deuce 6 isn't anything strong, but again, you could still be min raising there. Folding is fine. And flat a min raise here. I'd probably 3-bet here, with how active he's been. And check a dry flop that we missed. And all right, good. So I like what you're doing as far as the check raising the flop, but I don't like your sizing. Again, with a min raise here, we're never going to really fold out anything. He could even peel just dry ace type hands here, and we still have air at that point too. So I mean, if you're going to be making the move here, which is great, and this kind of a board is not the best in the world, like a king 7 deuce would be better. We got to remember that our opponent villain over here is going to be pretty competent. So he's going to be watching for us to be check raising on those type of boards as well. But those are the more favorable ones to do it on. And again, if we are going to be check raising here, I'd like a bigger size, something like 180, 190, 200, is even fine, but I'd probably keep it somewhere in that range. And we get flatted. So this puts us in a tough spot. It's not really the best card to be barreling anymore, especially since he just flatted. He's going to do that with a ton of his range, and this card could certainly hit a lot of his range as well. He could even be putting in another raise on the flop as well with a flush draw, but I think, given stacks and everything at this point, that he'd probably flat just a lot of flush draws as well. So I'm pretty much just going to give up here if we're hero. And you do, which looks good. He checks back. So there's not really a lot of rivers that I'm probably going to be barreling a whole lot either. He could have something like 8-9. 9, 10, he's obviously betting all flushes. We assume he's probably going to be betting. Probably would even bet like some King X type stuff here as well a lot of the time, and correctly so. Like if we check raise with a draw, we're obviously going to be hitting our draw most of the time with 4, 5. If we even check raise with 8, 9, he could probably expect us to be leading here too. So um, this is just a good time to give up and just move on. Tricky spot now, but I'm probably just going to be check folding a lot of the time. I might put out like a real small blocker bet. He could have like some 7x type hands or some 6x type hands that don't necessarily always have to have a heart, but he may bet a lot of those hands on the turn as well. So I might put out like a really small bet. The problem with doing that on this type of board is that you already look weak. And so when they interpret, that sizing, they can bluff raise you a lot. So it's just a really tough spot. I'm, again, fine with just checking and folding, really. You do bet about third pot here, and he does call. And that's pretty much what he had, was a 6x type hand with the 3 flush. So, again, I'm not really disappointed with how you played it by any means. I think it's fine. I would probably just, either bet a little bit smaller, maybe like 100 or 120, just because, in these types of situations, when he does have that, it's kind of money saved. But again, like I said, I'm fine with leading with a small bet there as well, just as kind of a blocker bet. And, a little bit unlucky that we did river a pair there after the kind of the way that the flop and the turn went. But again, I think you played it fine. I would probably just bet a little bit smaller if we are going to bet. But a lot of the time, too, he's going to be checking back with these types of hands on the river because he'll be scared that he's going to get called by a worse flush. So that should be fine to just check back here as well. And we would have saved ourselves 160 chips in this case. A little bit results oriented, but still true. And a lot of this type of stuff is going to save us those chips by checking back. All right, so moving on, we min raise here and get a fold. Probably would 3-bet there just because he's been active. Again, I'd be min raising here. We folded, I think, like 3 or 4 buttons at this point. We're probably like 15 to 20 hands in, so I'm probably going to stay a little bit more active rather than folding some of those. Obviously, we're 3-betting here, and this is way too big. So some people, especially like lower stakes players, can be scared to play this type of hand and see flops with, but we should never be jamming here. We're way too deep for that. We should be making it something like, if he makes it 80, like 180 to 210 or something like that would be fine. Again, this is just way too big and should never happen. So just make it a little bit smaller there, a lot smaller actually, in that 180 to 210 range. And again, this is way too strong to be limping here. We should definitely be min raising. And again, we should be barreling here as well. Just throw out a min bet of 40. Turn, we make the open-ended straight draw. We lead here, and he folds. Interesting that villain didn't lead here most of the times when if we're looking at hero as our opponent in this guy's seat, in this case, we should be barreling most turns when the flop does go check, check. He may be thinking about the fact that earlier he saw us check bottom pair, even though I'm still going to be barreling this turn a lot of the time with most of our air. And definitely min raise the Jack 10 suited going forward. And folding out there with the 3-5. Sorry, my hand history replayer is going nuts. Yeah, I'm never folding there either. I'm definitely going to be flatting there. And we're folding 6-7. Should definitely be min raising there as well. And folding Jack 5. Debatable, but we can still definitely flat there. I'd probably lean more towards a fold, but we've been kind of passive lately. Started to limp a lot, started to fold some more buttons, and with a lot of playable hands. So I'm going to probably be a little bit more active from the button than we have been. Min raising here is fine. Get a fold and get a walk with 4-6. Looks like we might be picking up a little bit more aggression here. So think about, just as kind of a reference point, we folded 6-7 a minute ago, and now we're min raising here with 9-5. I mean, they're pretty much the same as far as like, you know, the value of the hand itself. 6-7 you could argue is going to play a little bit better post flop in a lot of situations, but I mean, regardless, we should, if we're going to be opening 9-5, we should always be opening 6-7 as well. And get flat here, so standard half pot c bet, I'd assume. We like to check back. This is, you know, a really, really good flop to be c betting on, so we should always be doing it. It's just not going to hit villain's range that much, and we can always, you know, rep a ton of hands. He checks turn. We definitely need to bet here. You could even rep a line here by like slow playing trips, although that's not very common, at least, you know, anytime recently that I've ever seen. So we should definitely be c betting the flop. If we are going to check back this type of board, you would want to do that with some type of hands that we could, you know, have some type of value on for him to be barreling into us, which is obviously not the case. So we should definitely be c betting the flop. If he does check back the turn, we should be definitely c betting that turn as well after we miss the flop. And now we're left with a garbage hand where we had the lead pre-flop and we can't really rep hardly anything at all. So I mean, you could try to bet something really small to get him to fold, but at this point with him checking and everything, you'd have to assume he has some type of high card hand that he may even think is going to be good. So we bet 40 into 160. If we are going to bet, I would probably bet something a little bit more than a min bet here, just because he doesn't have much to think about getting like 5-1. He has to call 40 to win 200. You might even get looked up by like Jack High or something here. So that's exactly what he has. Not that that was like a sick read or anything, but you know, based on this board texture, like 10 high, Jack high, ace high, he's going to call you just because he's curious when you bet that small. He's going to call for a lot of information type purposes, and now he knows a lot about how we played that hand and what we played it with and how we didn't c-bet this flop and we didn't c-bet this turn. And then, I mean, there's just a lot of information that he gains by getting 5-1 there. Plus, you know, he can have a good hand as Jack High being the best hand a lot of the time. So I'm just not thrilled with how we played this hand. Definitely missed the c-bet on the flop. Always c-bet the turn. If for some reason we do c-bet or check back that flop, and I mean, you know, if we're going to be betting ace X on this river as a value bet, we should definitely be doing that on the turn, but more importantly, even on the flop as well. So kind of move on here, but standard call by him. And, you know, by the way that he played the hand, he's checking the river. He's going to probably bet lots of air on this river after the flop and the turn both get checked. So when he does check, we have to assume that he has some type of value type hand with, you know, high card, and in this situation he did. All right, so moved up in blinds again. Definitely always going to be flatting here with Jack 8. It's just too tight of a fold here, especially with how active villain has been. Easy min raise here, and we get called. Perfect flop. Definitely need to still be c-betting, even though we pretty much almost flopped the nuts in a situation like this with top pair, good kicker, and the nut flush draw. And c-bet half pot, get called, so looks beautiful. At this point, I'm going to bet like 150 to 200. So I'm interested to see what not your c-bet, but your bet sizing here on the turn is. 200 is fine. With even something as this strong, you could elect to bet 150, you know, just to try to entice some other hands to continue on, go forward, but I don't think it's going to make a ton of difference here. And unfortunately, he does fold. And assuming we fold there, which is fine. Good min raise here. Another good flop with top pair, get called. Interesting turn to say the least. You know, he could have like king queen. Obviously, he can have a lot of flush hands. Jack X, 9X is obviously there. Decent turn for two pair combos like 9-10, Jack 9. May have heard from him with a 3-bet pre-flop from like an ace 9 type hand. So wouldn't really assume that as being a 2-pair type hand, but also makes like some gut shots, as I mentioned with king queen, things like that. If he has a hand like queen 10, it's going to be hard for him to fold a lot of the time. If he has a hand like 8-10, same thing. So it's close. I mean, a lot of times if you do barrel here, you kind of make yourself vulnerable to get played off of your hand. A lot of the times when he check raises a turn like that, I wouldn't really expect it to be a bluff much. So we can usually, give him some fair credit for having a hand when he does do that. But I'm fine with checking back here and then just flatting a lot of the rivers, just because it's going to make a lot of combos. You just want to be careful which rivers it is. Obviously, blanks like a 2-3, all the way up through like 6-7 are probably going to be safe most of the time. Some 8x, like if he has 8-9 or something like that, could complete with a 7 hitting the river, but you just really want to watch for the river card here and then kind of analyze it and go forward from there. So he checks, we bet 150. Again, we're opening ourselves up when he does have us beat. At the same time, we're getting value when we're ahead, which is the obvious point. But with this, flop being so wet as far as the board texture and then the turn completing a lot of that, I'd be perfectly fine with just checking back here and then, seeing if we can either have him bluff into us in the river, but also kind of control the pot size and play a little bit of small ball as well. All right, so he does raise here, makes it 300 more. This is, a pretty standard fold. If we're going to be betting this turn, trying to charge him for value, we need to be, able to dump the hand here and just kind of let it go. Looks like we elect to call, and obviously one of the worst rivers, since it now makes a flush even more possible, but assuming that's probably what he had on the turn. A lot of the time, if he even does have a straight, making the straight on the turn here, he's probably just going to flat call a lot of the turns rather than check raise, because he doesn't want to open himself up to being re-raised by a flush when he has a straight. So I think this is a real easy check back on the turn. Would have saved us some in this case. Again, a little bit results oriented, but a lot of the time we're saving ourselves chips, and we can kind of get him to bluff a lot of rivers too, maybe with like an 8-9 type hand or a queen 10 type hand that doesn't connect, or make the straight draw going into the river. So he checks the river, which is weird. After he check raised, unless he has like a really low flush, like for example 5-6 of spades or something like that, he could check the river with, but there's no point in betting here. We just need to check back and expect him to have a flush. And we do. So I'd probably still lead. If I'm villain here, I'd probably still lead the river, being that, definitely King X and Queen X of spades can certainly be there. But usually when you are going to be leading this river here, King X is obviously going to raise. Queen X is probably even going to flat some of the time. And you can definitely get some value, like if he has, Ace 8 with the 8 of spades or something like that. You can still get some value by making a small value bet here on the river. 400, 500, something like that should be fine. But I'm definitely betting this hand on the river. All right, so moving on, I'm going to 3-bet here, just picking a random spot. He just won a big pot last hand, and we haven't been very active in 3-betting very much. When we did, we made it that min raise. So again, I'd elect if we do 3-bet to make it a bigger size. We ended up folding here, down 2-1 in chips here. Again, I'm still going to be active from the button. We're folding too many hands out here. And again, this is a pretty easy flat as well. These types of hands aren't going to play that bad post flop. Offsuit one gappers there, that's a pretty standard call. And again, we fold, so we're just kind of dumping chips here. We need to be more active, and another good spot to be 3-betting here. He's won like 3-4 hands in a row, just with game flow there. I think that'd be fine to kind of open it up a little bit. And again, we fold. So not thrilled with the last couple hands, but part of the learning process. This should certainly help. Again, way too deep to be open jamming here, just a min raise. And then we're kind of happy to get it in. If he does 3-bet, he's probably not going to jam at this stage either, just because we are too deep. But if he 3-bets, we could even jam a lot of cases here and be perfectly fine. But way too deep to be open jamming there. And we flat here with Queen Deuce. Again, this is not optimal way to play here. I would definitely just be checking. We're basically turning our hand into a bluff here and just praying that he doesn't have like a flush draw or something like, even 7-8. It's going to be tough for him to be calling, but he can probably sit there and think about it like, this just looks really, really weak. And even a hand like 7-8 does have decent equity right now. Just thinking about hand versus hand and not looking at the pot and taking that into effect, which obviously plays a role, but just trying to think about the equity of different hands against us. So, not a fan here. I would definitely just be standard, pretty much checking and calling. You could elect to check and fold a lot of the time on this flop as well, as we are somewhat shallow, but that's going to be one of the points of playing a hand like this at these stacks. You just, if you're going to put yourself out there, which flatting queen deuce suited here isn't a bad play by any means, but you definitely want to be able to play it more optimally, where you're not just going to be shoving your tournament away here if he does have a hand like ace-6 or something like that. Luckily he does fold, so we make it through there. Again, this is a perfect spot to be min raising. Even at a 2-1 deficit, we're still fine to be min raising here. And dream flop. So let's see what happens. Standard C bet looks good, and we should be getting it in here. Let's see, if we re-raise, we make it like 450, 500, something like that. Jamming might even look a little bit too big, but noting that he's check raising this flop, and I think that's about the only time he's done it, I'd be fine with jamming here, expecting a call, and one we're pretty much happy about too, with such a huge draw hand here. You do jam, he calls, so we're pretty decent favorite here with open-ended straight and a flush draw, with one over. And brick the turn and hit the river, so that's good. And now basically situations are reversed, where we're almost in a 2-1 advantage here. Fold to a min raise looks fine. Not a bad spot to be 3-betting there either. The problem with it is that you could look at villain saying he just lost a big pot, so he may be tilting. He may be willing to 4-bet jam more hands there as well. So a lot of these hands, it looks like, are going to be pretty quick here, small pots. This is a really, really standard min raise here. We should always be doing that. Definitely want to barrel this flop, and we do. We get check raised. So again, villain is competent. We have to assume playing in this tournament. This is a fun spot just because, it's kind of one of those leveling wars. At this point, you may not be used to it a lot, but this is a standard spot where he's going to be check raising a lot of these types of flops. Good sizing for a check raise. It just is all kind of dependent upon what he thinks about you and kind of what you think about him. He's probably going to be min raising a lot of the time. Not min raising, excuse me. Raising pre-flop after your limp with a lot of ace-x type hands, just trying to kind of take it down there with hands like ace-5 or ace-6 or something like that, all the way up through, ace-king and hands like that, just because he's going to defend kind of his spot where you have limped a lot of the time and you haven't really shown any aggression afterwards. It's going to be tough for him to put you on a lot of hands. So expect to get played back at this flop a lot of the time. Probably the best way to proceed would just be flatting here and then kind of seeing what happens on the turn. But we do fold out there. So a lot of the time he's going to check raise this flop knowing that we can't really be strong because we limped. He's probably not going to give us a lot of credit for any kind of ace-x type hands here. So it's really easy for him to check raise, and it's really easy for us to call as well, just knowing that he's going to be playing back at us. It's one of those things where when you're playing against regs, you want to be able to have that kind of, in your playbook, but, when you're going to be playing just some random fish and at lower stakes and things like that, you don't want to overthink spots unless you have some type of history or reason to. So against a reg, this is an easy spot to flat. You could even flat a turn and then expect a lot of the rivers that he's going to be checking. Granted, he is going to check raise like, some 4 or 5 type hands, some 2-pair type hands, things like that. So you just got to think about that as well. But most of the time, I think he's usually going to be check raising pretty weak on this type of a flop. And moving on, we get a walk here. And again, we fold there, especially now that, we have kind of the roles reversed as far as chip count goes. We even want to be more active here. So there's no reason to really tighten up at this point. We've been kind of standard so far and limping a lot and, folding out a lot of buttons as well, where we should become more active. And we get a fold there, unfortunately. Like to see flops with those types of hands. Min raise here, get a fold. Fold out 2-6 is fine. Min raise here looks good. You could definitely be flatting there as well. At these stacks, it's still fine. Min raise here looks fine as well. So again, kind of some boring hands here. So I apologize for that. Min raise here and get 3-bet. Standard spot. He hasn't been 3-betting us. I think this is probably one of the first times, if not the first time. So this is a really easy fold, obviously, with such a junk type hand. Interested in his sizing there. I'd probably make it a little bit less, probably something like 285 to 300 or 320 would probably be about the highest I would go. And folding to a min raise here is good. Could still min raise Jack 6 there, that's fine. Easy flat here with 8-9 and a good flop with top pair and a gut shot. We could definitely just check raise and get it in here a lot of the time and be fine. If he does, jam over us, but I'm fine with putting in a check raise here. And we do. Sizing looks pretty good. I can't really say a whole lot about that. I'd probably keep it something real similar to this. And he flats. Turn, is pretty much a blank. We should definitely be betting the turn here. A lot of the time, he could be doing this with hands like Ace-8, Ace-6, 7-6, 5-6. I mean, all types of different hands that have some equity against us, but at the same time, we have him in a good spot, and we should be protecting our hand when he does have those types of hands. So giving him a free card here on this turn isn't a good idea. He does bet here, and we're too strong to fold. So now that he does bet, it wouldn't be a bad spot, honestly, just to check raise jam. A lot of the times, I feel like, if he did flop really huge, that he's probably just going to re-raise it on this type of board anyway. As an example, like if he flopped a set or something like that, you could be check raising a lot of type like Ace-8 of clubs hands, Ace-6 of club types hands that he wants to just get it in with there. So I'd be perfectly fine with just jamming here, honestly. And we flat, and the river's a 7, so not the best card in the world. Certainly not the worst either, but he does check back, unfortunately. Kind of one of those cooler situations. As played, we probably might have saved ourselves a little bit by not betting that turn when he does have this type of hand, but there's so much more of his range that we are ahead of that we definitely need to be betting this turn on. And just one of those unfortunate spots where we're kind of out-kicked, but we're also lucky in the fact that we do get to chop it as well. So that's always nice when you when you're unlucky enough to run into that kind of situation and then you chop it up. Again, we should be min raising here. And a lot of people will argue that they don't like to 3-bet those types of hands because they don't play well post-flop, which is true. They don't really play any much better when you flat them pre-flop either. 3-betting there is perfectly fine, especially with how active he is. I would probably just be 3-betting. It can put you in some tough spots when he 4-bets, but at that point, we basically know that we're already beat anyway, and it should be a pretty easy fold. So I would be 3-betting those types of hands at this stage. Min raise here looks good. And fold out there. Min raise looks good here as well. Should definitely be c-betting this flop. Again, just a standard half pot c-bet would be fine. Something like 120 at 40 would be about perfect. He leads the turn. He's going to do this a lot of the time after we check back the flop. We do have a little bit of history now, so he can understand that we do that with like bottom pair and a situation that we saw earlier. But now that we turn a pair, we're kind of in nowhere land. We don't really know where our hand's at. If we actually do bet the flop and he calls, then this makes this situation a lot easier. We can just check back the turn, try to make 2-pair or trips or something, and get the free card on the turn. But now, we're kind of in a spot where we have the exact same hand as we would had we bet the flop. We still see the turn card, if he does flat. But now we're in a tough situation where we have no idea. He's going to barrel us here a lot of the time with complete air. So I don't really like folding here either, which we do. And all right, so blinds are up again, getting a little bit closer to even stacks, and we flat here. We're fine with that. No problem flatting here, even though we blinds just went up and stacks are a little bit shallower. You could definitely like to flat here. Good part about it, when you do obviously make your straight, a lot of the times you'll be able to get paid off by a lot of ace-x type hands. We have obviously the dominating straight when a 5x does come off that's not a spade. So I'm fine with flatting here. We even have two overs that we can probably assume are going to be good most of the time as well, if he does have any of this type of flop. And again, you can easily get paid from hands like, ace four, ace three, 3-5, 3-4, or excuse me, 4-5 type hands. So I'm still fine with flatting, especially since he's betting so small. Makes me think he's probably a little bit stronger, based on kind of what we talked about earlier, but I'm probably not going to be folding out here, especially with two overs with the gut shot. And min raise here looks good. Still want to stay aggressive, especially, now stacks are evening out a little bit. No reason to tighten up at all. Probably want to 3-bet again sometime soon here. We've been, just folding a lot, and it's, not given a really strong image. When we do 3-bet, we're generally going to get a lot of respect with the history that we've had so far at this point. All right, moving on here, we min raise with king 10, get a 3-bet. This is perfectly standard, just flat here. If we're villain shoes, again, I'd probably make it a little bit smaller. Oh, never mind. I thought it was earlier blind level. Yeah, this is perfect stack sizing for villain here. I like that. So easy for us to call here for 200 more. And we do. And he c-bets just a little bit under half pot. If we did raise, that would pretty much just say we're ready to get it in. At the same time, I'm not comfortable flatting here. When we do, there's going to be about 1,400 out there. Somewhere right around there, and at that point we're giving him a free card. So when a turn comes like a queen or something like that, it's going to put us in a lot of tough situations. So if he has us beat, he has us beat, but I'm definitely getting it in here. I would make a raise to like probably 820-ish, somewhere right around in there, and then if he jams, we're just going to get it in. You raise jam here, probably a little bit too big. The good part about this is that, if he does have a hand like queen 10 or jack 10, he's obviously never folding in a lot of cases. This really reps a draw a lot of the time, but I would much rather just make it a little bit smaller of a raise and then maybe allow him to, go off with hands like ace 8 or something like that. Again, devil's advocate, if villain does have ace 8 over here, he may even, call more likely just because this looks like, a straight draw or something like that. Our image at this point doesn't look like we're in any kind of like, crazy mode besides a couple jams that we've made when we've been too deep. This is an argument that could be made for one of them. Even though our objective is to get it in, we still want to make a smaller raise just to allow some of his weaker hands to continue and to try to raise over us. When we do that, we make it like 820 here, whatever, like I said. We've just put in, 820 of 2740. So it doesn't really look like we have, like he has a lot of fold equity when he does jam. But again, it just kind of gives us, I guess, a sense that our hand could be a little bit weaker in that kind of a case when we do jam here, which, again, just kind of goes back to calling. I'm kind of, going on a little bit, but just kind of looking at each of the different situations. I think it's kind of an interesting spot with these stacks and, things like that. He does fold, which, we're all right with, but at the same time, we want to get it in a lot of the times there. Figuring we're going to have the best of it when he doesn't have an overpair. So almost back at a 2-1 here. All right, so hopefully he min raises here. Yeah, this is a good spot to be 3-betting. 3-bet jamming is probably just a little bit too deep. I'd much rather do that when we're around kind of like a 20-ish big blind stage. Here we're a little bit too deep for that, so I'm just gonna 3-bet it, and then when he jams, we're just gonna get it in every time. Make it something like 440-ish, somewhere right around there. In that range, 420 to 440 would probably be about my sizing. We do jam, and he does fold. Not that jamming, is going to be terrible here, but at the same time, I just think we're just a little bit too deep for that. And we limp here. Again, I'd stay aggressive by min raising. Good flop, we should definitely be barreling. min bet here, which we do. Good turn. This is another standard spot that we should be betting now on the turn for value, since we turned second pair as well as the open and the straight draw. Again, another bet sizing of like 120 to 160. A little bit too small. This is going to give him a lot of hands like, if he does have King 10, obviously we're beat. King Jack obviously got there too, but this is a spot where we want to be betting for value to protect our hand, but at the same time we can get a lot more out of our bet sizing here. Like if we bet 120 or 160, I don't think it makes any difference to him. So he's going to continue either way when we bet that sizing, and when he does continue, we just cost ourselves 80 chips by betting this small. So I do like betting a bigger amount there. Moving on, face of min raise and flat. This is the point where we don't want to start 3-betting these type of hands that play well post flop, just because it's going to put us in some tough spots. So I think flatting is perfectly fine. Decent flop here with a double gutter, needing a jack or a 7. He checks, so we need to be betting a lot of turns, especially like any cards that come off that are 5x or lower are going to be great. Obviously a jack or a 7 is going to be great. Queen is even fine. There's just tons of turn cards here that are going to be good for us. Obviously the worst being like King X and Ace X. So another great spot here on the turn. We should definitely be betting, just because he does have some of those like King X, Ace X type hands. We're not necessarily ahead of by any huge margin. We can take down the pot here, and then if he does call, we still have a lot of outs. So good spot to be betting here. We check. He bets half pot. Standard flat. I would much rather be leading here though, and we fold. So this is just a bad fold. And again, we should be leading over anything. So we have way too much equity in this pot to be folding here, and just should never ever be clicking the fold button. Min raise here looks all right. Another good flop to be c-betting here, which we do. He check raises here. Good sizing by him. You can, if you flatted like an ace x type board here, I think this is fine. Ace x type board, ace x type hand pre-flop is what I meant to say. Interesting spot because a competent villain can just try to pick up a pot here when not a whole lot has really been going right for him as of late. Just a decent spot to be stabbing, getting a good price, putting in 400 to win the 480 that's out there. So interesting. I'd probably flat here, but again, it can get awkward at these stacks because if he's going to bet the turn every single time, that's going to put us in a lot of tough situations because we can't really continue past the turn when he does lead. So folding isn't bad, calling isn't bad, but if he's going to check raise here with air on the flop and he's going to lead the turn, if we have that history with him and know he's going to do that, then it's a really easy spot where we should just be folding or jamming over. Is certainly an option as well. The problem is that depending on villain, which we don't have history with in this type of situation, with his check raising, he hasn't done it very much, which makes him look a little bit stronger. And at the same time, we can't really think that he's going to put in this much of his stack on a pure bluff, just kind of random air type hand, unless we know that he's kind of a reg, which we obviously have that piece of it, but we don't know what he does in these type of situations, which is obviously the most important. So if we had some type of history where he's check raising flops, and then continuing on and we see him barreling with air and things like that, that would obviously be great. Again, kind of opens up the leveling part just because he knows that we know that he's done that in the past. So just another interesting type spot. I'm probably just going to lay it down, given the history that we have, but you could certainly jam over here. But a decent amount of the time, I mean, he's just going to have like a weak ace X type hand that's going to get it in. Some of those situations, he's not going to elect to 3-bet that pre-flop. So just kind of an interesting spot there, to say the least. We do fold, and flatting here is good. Another good spot to be check raise bluffing. Again, you don't want to do it too much against regs because they're not going to expect you to do it that much, and have like a really solid hand just because of the board texture and how dry it is. But A standard spot to also be check folding in a lot of cases as well. I'd elect to do that more against a reg rather than a fish, especially. So check folding there is fine. Min raising here looks good. We get 3-bet. Probably a little bit too big. If we're villain, I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. Depending on your hand here, if you're willing to make it this big, you might as well just jam it in, honestly. But if I'm going to be 3-betting here and, I want to see a flop or play flops or, keep dominating hands in, like if we had like an ace-jack type hand and we want to get called by like jack-10, that kind of a situation, we should be banking a little bit smaller because it just makes it that much tougher for them to continue. So if I'm you, I'm going to be making it like probably 420 to 460. So just a little bit too big, I think. Here, this is obviously an easy fold for us. If we were to call 400 more, there'd be 1,000 and change in there, 1,100. And stacks obviously wouldn't be that great for it, being that he only has about two times that left in his stack, which we're basically forced to get it in with any kind of flop, if we hit any piece of it. So easy fold there. Face a min raise here and fold. I'm probably still flatting king 2 off there. Again, I'm going to be min raising here. Shouldn't be limping here at this stage. He raises. Decent raising size. I might just make it a little bit smaller. Again, you could argue that that's a preference type thing. If you're doing this as a bluff, that's also fine too. I'm probably not going to fold here, honestly, if I limped, but I wouldn't have limped in the first place. I'd be min raising. So we do fold, and we fold to a min raise. Another good spot to be min raising here. We've just given him way too many walks throughout this. Stacks are basically even now. Blinds are up again, so we're a little bit shorter now. Getting into about 30 big blind stacks here. Obviously, we should be 3-betting here. Jamming is, one of those things. I mean, we really want to get this in. We want to get called. And we also want some of those hands that we have crushed, like ace-10, ace-9, and lower. We want those hands to be continuing, and we also want to get it in versus any hand that we're flipping with. He's probably going to call off pretty much every pair here, I would think, a lot of the time. Again, our image, he hasn't seen a lot from us to where we've looked too crazy or anything, regardless of the jams that were too deep earlier. He doesn't probably think we're just going to be doing this randomly with any junk type hand or as a bluff at this stage. So we have to expect that we're going to get a little bit of credit, but he can call with a lot of his range here too, obviously. I just elect to make it a little bit smaller. I'd probably make it like 550, 500, somewhere in that range, and expect him to be able to, jam over some type of hands that we do have dominated. Whereas here, he may elect to fold some of those hands, like, if he has ace-4 or something like that, he may fold here, whereas he actually may be 4-betting, 4-bet jamming those hands in a case where we do make it a little bit smaller. And he folds. Min raise here looks good. Again, we want to keep the pressure on. Flatting here is perfect. Not a bad spot to be check raise bluffing here. He makes it 140. I kind of like this bet sizing at this stage. It's going to make it a little bit easier on you just to continue throughout other streets. I'm probably going to make it, if we check raised here, probably something like 340-ish. Even if we had like Jack 10 versus 10-9 here, but this is a good spot to be check raising. We haven't done it that much, but again, we need to focus on our sizing when we do. You make it 300, which is just a little bit smaller than I'd like to make it, but regardless, it's just another thing that you could argue might be a preference versus an actual benefit to be making a little bit bigger. But again, that's only going to make it easier for him to continue with those types of hands. When we did do that earlier, he saw us show up in that pot where we had air, and he'd like runner the low flush on there. So he knows we're capable of it. You just got to be careful in what you do in this kind of a situation. And again, we don't want him to continue that much of the time. So making it a little bit bigger, I think is perfectly fine too. He does fold, which is good. So good spot there. Well played. We get 10s again. kind of card rack in here. Min raise, he jams, easy call. So this is kind of a spot that I was talking about earlier. If he's going to be able to jam here, 3-betting, that's certainly, it's different than, 4-bet jamming pre as a bluff. In that spot, he might not be doing it, but in this type of situation, those are the types of hands that you want to get in, where you are going to be, having them dominated. Sick flop, obviously, and we don't suck out. And he limps here. So now we're at like 13 and a half big blinds, just a little bit over. You could definitely min raise here. He hasn't limped a whole lot, which is kind of weird. So he could be setting a tarp here for us, as some people say, but I'm sure Mark275 is, really a big fan of this play here. But this is a really, tricky spot just because we don't know what he's capable of in this kind of a situation since we don't have much history. If we do raise, I'd make it like 225, but I'm fine with also checking back, obviously. I'd expect him to barrel tons of flops here every single time, regardless of what he has. And we should be thinking of a plan to kind of combat that as well. He does min bet, so making a check raise here can put us in a tough spot. Jamming here, honestly, couldn't be that bad, really, just because he's probably not going to be able to limp with a ton of hands. Like ace X at this stage, he would probably just rather open jam. So it's like he either has a huge pair or he has complete air here, I think, a lot of the time. So I wouldn't be that mad at just check raise bluffing here. Jamming, you can obviously say it would be okay as well if you're going to elect that sizing. You could try to do some flatting too. Just makes it a little bit more tricky. The good spot that you want to look for in a situation like that is when you do call the flop, turn goes check, check. The river isn't going to give you any kind of easy spot by any means, but you can kind of float the flop and then look for a check, check on the turn and then try to lead bluff on the river. But you do fold here, which, is the more conservative route, which is typical from kind of low stakes players. Not that that's awful, but just kind of some options that we could kind of go through at that point. All right, so we fold out 4-6 there, 12 big blinds basically. We do need to kind of tighten up a little bit. We're looking to kind of just jam, get it in pre when we can, and 4-6 is fine to fold there. This is close. We saw him just do it a minute ago with King 3. He 3-bet jammed, so, he's going to do that with a lot of hands that we have some decent equity against. If he's going to do this with like Queen 10, Jack 10 type stuff, I think he probably is certainly capable of that and would. So I'm probably not gonna fold here very much of the time. But at the same time, I'm not like really excited about calling either. It's just one of those spots where it's really close, so I'm just gonna call. We do, and basically a flip, get a nice flop, and hold up, which is nice, especially after we lost with the 10s. Still gonna be min raising here with 6-7, just under 24 big blinds there. That would have been an interesting spot. He min raises. You could jam there, but I'd probably just flat. And moving on, we fold out 8-4. Again, I'm probably still going to stay pretty active in min raising pre-flop. Easy fold here. And pretty easy fold there. At this point, you want to be a little bit more active pre-flop like we've talked about throughout the video. Not that I want to be repetitive or anything, but you do want to tighten up a little bit as hands become, less playable. Post-flop with smaller stack sizes. And, also you want to make sure that those hands are going to play well a little bit better post. Hands like 2-6 and stuff like that. Obviously, you can be in raising at 15-30, whereas now if you did that, it's going to make it a little bit tougher to kind of continue, and you have to be more careful if flops you're c-betting in some situations and things like that. So we get a walk there, which is nice. Probably still be playing the min raise, Jack 7 there. Obviously going to get it in here if he raised. Getting it in here. Don't like jamming here. 22 big blinds, I'd rather min raise. Maybe we can get him to jam in some hands like King Jack, King 8 suited type stuff, hands that we have crushed. This just makes it easier for those hands to kind of fold, honestly. King Jack, I think he probably may even still call here. I don't know. We'd have to ask him at basically 23 big blinds, but it's one of those spots where some people just look at this as like, oh, he's gonna have a small pair every time, so they know it's basically a flip, which is good. You're kind of balancing, I guess, by doing that. But I'm still never ever jamming here. I'm just always gonna be min raising. He does fold, and yeah, I'm probably gonna flat here. We do fold, and min raise here would be fine. We elect to jam. Kind of same situation. I won't kind of go over that again. Get a walk, fold here with queen six. Not that I have like a line where I would be like this type of hand. I probably would just fold on the button now versus earlier I'd be min raising it. The hand before queen six, I'd probably still min raise. Queen high is just kind of too strong just to be folding there on the button. Fine with folding 4-6 there. Probably still playing the jack 3 in position. Blinds are up again, so we're a little bit shallower. This is obviously going to get in. Should he raise? We've got a walk there again. Good, like min raising here. And walk there, or give him a walk there, which is fine. Fine with folding here, that looks good. And we give him a walk, or excuse me, not a walk. I said that a minute ago too. We just fold out the 3-5 there. A little bit rusty. And I'm probably still going to be min raising here. Instead, we do give him a walk there with the fold. Now it's even tougher to be flatting here. Now that we're a little bit even more shallow at this point. So, I mean, if you're going to call here, you just got to be, able to play post flop really well, given these stack sizes. So I'm probably just going to flat here, whereas some other people may elect to fold. Probably just one of those closer spots. Obviously a bad flop for us. Tough to really lead here a lot of the time, especially when he checks back. This is a pretty good board for him to be c-betting, especially at these stack depths. I'm probably just going to check here and see what happens. We lead, he calls, we lead river again. After he calls the turn, we got to look at this river. Like, is he going to fold to this river a lot? My answer is no. I don't think he's going to. So I'm probably just going to give up here on the river. He does call, and unfortunately, sucked out with us on the 3 there, which is rough. But at the same time, again, if we check that river, he probably even checks back this river, I would think, a lot of the time too. So another was one of those spots where it is results oriented for sure, but again, we would have saved ourselves some chips too by checking. And moving on, so we jam here, which is pretty standard, looks fine to me. And we're just under like 12 bigs here. Obviously getting it in here. And easy jam there. Kind of some more boring hands here real quick. We do see a flop here. And so good flop for us. We can't really think that he's going to be limping a lot of ace-x at this depth here. He bets. Honestly, like, I probably wouldn't check raise, but if we did, I'd be fine with check raise getting it in here. So I'm just probably going to flat moving forward. Turn 8-9, 5-8. Not that we always want to think about like the worst case scenario in this situation, but we certainly need to be aware of those spots as well. He leads again. I hate kind of calling now just because we're putting so much money in the pot, but at the same time our hand is kind of too strong to fold as well. Don't really like going into a river with the plan of calling the turn and then folding on the river, but in this situation I think it's kind of warranted. So it's a tough spot, being that he bet the turn, but a lot of competent people are also going to bet this turn with air as well. If he had like king 8 or something like that, I don't really see him taking a free card here either on this type of board. I think he'd probably be double barreling a lot of the time too, so kind of leans me more towards calling. Obviously a great river for us. I'd honestly be fine with making a big bet here like 700 or something like that, or even open jamming. I don't think he's probably going to bluff a lot of the time. Um, so which kind of makes my turn thinking maybe a little bit flawed. I don't. It's just such a tough spot on that turn. I think at these stacked ups, but I'm probably just gonna jam here, or make a decent size bet like 700, 800, something like that. We do jam and he does fold. So he might fold like an 8-9 type hand on this river. I'm not sure. An interesting hand to say the least for sure. Obviously, trying to get it in here when we can. Probably still wouldn't be open jamming then, again, for the reasons I mentioned earlier. We want some of those hands that we're dominating to try to, 3-bet jam over us. But he does fold. And he limps here. So this is kind of the second time we've seen that happen now. Earlier, not that we gained a ton of information from that spot, but I think now that this is the second time they did it, we could definitely try to make a small raise here just as a bluff and try to take down this 240. We flop a pair. We expect him to bet every flop in a lot of situations. If I can recall correctly, throughout this match, he's done so in the majority of those. So can't really fold here, being that we have a pair. Turn doesn't really change much. If we were good on the flop, we're good on the turn. Would expect him to tighten up a little bit as far as his double barreling range on this turn. He's probably going to play Queen X like this a lot of the time. He would probably still bet like hands like if he did limp at this stage with like Ace 4 or something like that. He's probably still going to be betting this turn. Obviously, Queen X, he might check back since he has showdown value. He doesn't want to get played off of his hand when you do have a 7X type hand. So, interesting spot. We'll see what happens on the river here. I'm probably just going to check and call, but I don't expect him to be bluffing that much. So when he does bet, it's probably something going to be like a Queen X or a Jack X. He might even just, check back with 4X type hands like we have here. But I'm probably just going to check and call as a bluff catcher. Leading small here isn't bad either. Quarter pot is fine. He does fold. I just think a lot of the time, probably when we do bet and call on this type of board with this action, that we're probably just going to have a lot of times where we're losing more than we gain. So I'd prefer to just check call on that spot. And jamming here. So we're like 17, 18 big blinds. Probably a little bit too deep to just be open jamming here with King 8. Again, I'd probably just prefer to min raise. But we do get a fold. And again, we should probably be attacking this now. He probably feels pretty comfortable limping against us. This is the third time in recent, probably 10, 15 hands where he's done this, and we haven't played back at him at all. So we should be testing that for sure. Decent flop here again with a pair. Board texture is tricky. I don't usually lead a whole lot of the time unless we had like 5X on this type of a dry board. Sometimes, if you have history with an opponent, you could lead with the nuts and all kinds of different things. But given that we have a whole lot of history just this match here, I'm just going to go ahead and probably just check call. He barrels again like he's done every single time. That's kind of important to continue to remember. Again, we're too strong to fold. Turn is, again, not a bad one. Kind of a similar hand like we played a minute ago. Another tough spot, just like we had kind of a minute ago when the board paired on the turn. It's important to remember, though, that he did check back that time, and now he is betting. Again, you could think of like the leveling between it. Well, he knows that we just did that last time, so he may think that, now we think that he's only going to do that on the turn with a really stronger hand, trying to rep like 3X here. So you could argue to fold too. Again, it's a tough spot. I think we're still too strong to be folding. And river isn't the greatest in the world either. Given this board texture and the fact that we've called twice now, especially when the board paired on the turn, I expect him to be bluffing 0% of the time here. So, when we check here, I definitely don't expect him to be betting any kind of air type hands at all. I just expect him to be giving up a lot of the time. And he does bet. So, interesting. I guess I just fold here a lot of the time. Like I said, my read, I definitely don't think that he's just going to be 3-barrel bluffing. We do call, and I was wrong. So good read there for sure. Interested to hear his comments and everybody else's too. I don't think that a lot of villains are going to be 3-bet, or 3 barreling here. on the flop, turn, and river with complete air. I think a lot of the time, especially given this river, um, maybe he has a different game plan than I did, but I just don't see it being that typical of a situation where they're going to be betting all three streets with air. But great call. Obviously, you were right. I certainly can't criticize you for that. But I think kind of if you look at the majority of the population, that you're not going to see villains, three barreling here a very big majority of the time. And like I said, I'm surprised that he did. But again, great call for sure. So moving on here, min raising here would be fine. Again, we want to stay active in position. We're not really trying to play flops at this point. We're just trying to kind of win those small pots pre-flop when we can by min raise and just try to take it down. Obviously, easy fold here. And again, we'd prefer to be min raising here to try to get him to jam some hands over us. We know that he's capable of doing that with like the king three we saw earlier. That comes to mind. So again, this is a great spot to be min raising. We're probably just giving him a lot of chances to just kind of, get off the hook, whereas min raising gives him that opportunity. And he gives us a walk here. Threes, now I would be fine with jamming. Again, you want to kind of balance that which you have, but a lot of those types of situations, like there's obviously a huge difference between threes and eights and the amount of hands that you can have dominated here. So in this kind of a spot, I'm just going to open jam, which I'd expected you to do. He does call with ace-8, which is perfectly standard. Gets a flop, and we brick out. And here we're obviously going to have to get it in pretty much a lot of the time as well. At 10 big blinds, I just think this is, pretty normal when he min raises just to jam. It all depends on villain. I mean, I've seen people do this at like, honestly, believe it or not, like 6 or 7 big blinds, and those are from high stakes regs. So it just kind of depends what your thoughts of him are doing at this point. I think a lot of the time, unless he has like a monster at these stack sizes, 10, 11 big blinds, that he's probably just going to be jamming all types of hands. So it sucks when we do jam and he wakes up with one of those, but I'm fine with just jamming here. I'm also fine with flatting. Folding is never really an option. So we do jam and he does call, pretty standard. So this kind of a situation, when we were looking at bigger stack sizes, when we were just open jamming at like 25 big blinds and things like that, this is kind of one of those situations where you want to get it in, where you're pretty much almost always going to be a favorite, in this type of a situation with an ace-jack type hand or pocket eights like we had earlier, where we just know that he's capable of jamming over other hands. This is the kind of situation I was referring to, but obviously these stack depths are different. So overall, pretty good match. Honestly, there's a lot of variance here in the end with kind of flipping back and forth. You got a little bit unlucky when you had the pocket pair and he had the king three. Couple things I would just note: bet sizing. We want to be more active in three betting. As we discussed, again, I don't want to harp on that. Min raising more often, limping less often, and just kind of those main points that I highlighted throughout the video. So, of course, any questions or anything, feel free to get back to me, and I'll be happy to answer those. So I thank you guys for watching, and I hope you liked it.